going to hear Ms. Stevenson talk to us about the Heart and Stroke Foundation. The title of her presentation this evening is Protect Your Health, the Facts About Heart Disease and Stroke.
Thank you. I'm coming here tonight as a representative and a volunteer of the Heart and Stroke Foundation, and this is a presentation that they have available to the general public about what a stroke is, what heart disease is, the risk factors and strategies for prevention. So how the heart works. First of all, the heart is about the size of your fist, which is located behind your sternum or your breastbone, slightly to the left-hand side. It pumps about 100,000 times a day, and in a lifetime for a 7-year-old person, the heart, which you see before you now, is comprised of 4 chambers. On the top are 2 atria, or the singular form of atrium. The bottom are 2 ventricles. And the atrium and the ventricle are joined by a valve, and in the middle is the muscle. The brain, which you see before you, is a very complex organ. It has about 100 billion, I believe, neurons, specialized neurons that function in it. And there are different components to the brain. The cerebrum, which is, you see before you, which is a large component with the different colors on it, that controls many different aspects according to where the lobes are. For example, the frontal cortex. The impact of the stroke depends largely on how large the disruption in the blood flow is, as well as where it's located. So the symptoms between a heart attack and a stroke are very much related in that respect, such as the size of the interruption in the blood flow. And just like a heart attack, a stroke is often called a brain attack when you're looking at the layman's term, just because of the similarities in the patterns that I described. There are 2 different types of stroke. The 80% of the strokes are ischemic strokes, which are now the warning signs of stroke. These are all sudden changes that you notice. So, for example, a sudden loss in strength or sudden numbness in the face, arm, leg. That can occur something as someone going along and stumbling and losing their balance because their leg doesn't work properly, or noticing that their arm is a bit clumsy. Sudden difficulty speaking or understanding speech, or sudden confusion, even in temper. So people are speaking all of a sudden something gibberish.
Tonight I'm going to talk about the development and the construction of the electrocardiogram, or the ECG. The electrocardiogram is an instrument that measures and records all the electrical activity in the heart at a given time. Now, doctors can use this information to diagnose a wide variety of heart diseases. To begin my presentation, I'm just going to briefly talk about the history of the diagnosis of heart disease itself, and then talk about the development of the theory and mechanics behind the electrocardiogram. The second half of my presentation, I'm going to talk about how the introduction of the electrocardiogram affected cardiac patient management at Kingston General Hospital. At the beginning of the 19th century, heart disease wasn't actually diagnosed until after death. So doctors would examine cadavers from patients and look for anatomical cardiac abnormalities that they would use as indicators that would suggest that the patient did in fact suffer from heart disease during life. And the diagnoses they made were things such as congenital heart disease, which is damage to the vessels or the heart at birth. The next thing they used was using various cardiac sounds to diagnose a wide range of heart disease, and from this method they were able to actually diagnose heart disease during a patient's lifetime. There were 2 main methods that they used, and one's shown in this picture right here, the first one. And it was simply a doctor would place his ear up to a patient's chest wall and listen for different cardiac sounds. So, example would be cardiac murmurs were described as a sound like that of file on wood, and that's how they would diagnose cardiac murmurs. The second method was percussion. So it basically involved the doctor tapping on the patient's chest wall and listening to variations in the sound produced. And the idea was that the sound would change depending on what underlying structure the doctor was tapping up against. So this was useful in measuring the size of different organs, and useful in diagnosing things such as cardiac enlargement of the muscle. Further advancements in the diagnosis of heart disease included the invention of the stethoscope in 1812. Now, the stethoscope is a big staple in clinical medicine today, but the very first prototype of the stethoscope was simply just a roll of paper. A more common model used at that time was a cylinder piece of wood, and it's simply the doctor would place one end of the cylinder piece of wood up against the patient's chest wall, and the other end they'd place their ear and just listen for various cardiac sounds to make their diagnosis. Doctors liked this idea because it provided space between them and their sick patients. Also during the 19th century was the invention of pulse recorders. And this instrument was a series of levers that would basically sit on the patient's forearm and measure the variations in the patient's pulse. The advantage of this instrument was that it was also attached to an ink writing apparatus, so the doctor actually had a visual graphical representation of the patient's pulse, and then they could deduce quantitative measurements from this. This was more a precise way to diagnose heart disease, and they were able to have more specialized diagnoses out of this. And finally, at the beginning of the 20th century is when the electrocardiogram came into play. And the first galvanometer was able to measure electric currents in living tissue in 1827. And what they did, they had electrodes and they placed them directly on the heart and then attached the other ends to the galvanometer. And when they did this, they saw negative variations in the electrical charge with every beat of a heart. This was the first mapping that was done of the cardiac electrical potential. Right here is an actual tracing of the capillary electrometer, and how Gabriel recorded tracings was he actually magnified, because when this meniscus moved, it moved like maybe a fraction of a milliliter. So he had to expand it, so he projected the image, and what he did, he had a photographic plate behind it, and he shone light just through the capillary column. And when the mercury column moved up and down, it would block the light and then leave the photographic plate unexposed behind it. So the black part represents the height of the mercury column, and it represents fluctuations in the electric current of the heart. This is a later model. It's from the museum, actually. It's one of our artifacts, and it's more of a portable machine, so it's a lot smaller, but it still has the same components as Beethoven's first instrument. So the box labeled A would be the string galvanometer, and to the B is the camera. And he had this wheel that had spokes on it, and it would interrupt the light at regular intervals to measure the tone. How does this compare to the electrocardiogram? The electrocardiogram, so this is the PQRST labeling system, and these are there's three characteristic waveforms that are common to electrocardiogram tracing. So you have the P segment, the Q and RNF, and then the T. So the P over here represents the spread of the electrical impulse throughout the atrium, and the QRS complex represents the spread of electrical impulse throughout the ventricles, and the T wave represents the repolarization, which is when a cardiac cell produces an electrical impulse, it becomes more positive. And repolarization just means it's coming back to baseline, so it's becoming more negative.